Hey everybody, Rhadamant here. Thanks for tuning in to episode 1 of a brand new series on Stationeers. So if you're unfamiliar with what Stationeers is, it is a survival game where you manage and construct your own space station or space base, which includes trying to engineer fully functioning atmospherics, power, engineering, medical, agricultural systems. It is a lot of fun, but very complicated, and that's where a series like this comes in handy. I won't be going over the control schemes, so if you want to follow along in this Let's Play series, I really highly advise that you get at least a little bit familiar with the game and its controls, because the controls initially are a little tricky. Once you get used to them, they won't be a hindrance to you anymore. Let's get started. So the first thing we want to do is create a new world on Mars. I'm picking Mars because it has a fun sort of atmosphere to work with. So right as you start, you're going to have the Stationpedia. You can either hold left alt to navigate around it, or for me, hit F1 to get rid of it. Anything that you didn't need to know, I'm going to be telling you. So the first thing you want to do is to find your construction supplies and switch hands so that you're moving your duct tape into the box and grabbing the iron frames. And what I'm going to do is lay out a nice 3x3 of iron frames. Now, I don't know exactly the orientation of the sun at the moment, so I'm not going to worry about this. This iron frame is just so that I can put down my construction. So now that I have a 3x3, let's grab my iron sheets, and then in my other hand, put the welder tool. Hit F to bring it out, hit O to turn it on, and weld one sheet per frame. What this allows you to do is to stand on it. Without a frame, you'll sink into it. It doesn't actually take up physical space, except for the corners and edges. But obviously, that's not very useful as a platform. This is sort of like, think of it as laying down a foundation. So now that you have one sheet per frame, we can put the welder away. Make sure to turn it off first. If you don't turn it off, what will end up happening is when you put it away, you'll notice a weird flickering light around. That's just because your welder is on, which looks very, very weird. Holding shift and using the mouse wheel changes your perspective. So let's turn this baby off because we also don't want to waste our welder gas. Now the next thing we want to do is to put down our auto lathe and arc furnace. Now, I'm not exactly sure what the orientation of the sun is, but it does look like there's some light on this face, which means this would be east. So east to west. I'm going to assume that that's the case, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my auto lathe here. And I'll put my arc furnace right like this, and I hope I'm not wrong. Now that those two objects are laid out, let's go ahead and move the construction box a little bit so it's more accessible. We'll grab a power controller and make sure that the power controller faces, the output faces our objects that we want, which is this data lightning bolt symbol. Place that down and then open it up with a crowbar. So you can see if you've done it right, if the input, oh, and I've actually done it backwards. The output faces the objects that we want to power on. So let's open that baby up and then run some cabling to these two objects. So the power for this furnace is on this side. We don't need the data port. The data port would be used for automating the furnace. If you wanted to automate your furnace, I usually don't automate my furnace, my arc furnaces at least, because they're arc furnaces after all. And then put the wire cutters in our hand so we can merge cables like this. And one more corner and we're all set. So, as I suspected, this is indeed east, meaning this is north, this is west, and this is south. That's perfect. Given that new information, I can lay out some additional frames. So I'm going to lay frames down for an airlock. And I have to move this air scrubber out of the way. So this is where an airlock will go. And then there will be a little room here which will be for plumbing and air, and then one little spot for our farm, our future farm. Now I'm not currently worried about welding any of the iron sheets to that. I'm going to wait. But one thing I will do is to put a solar power panel and construct it fully so that we can make sure that our batteries don't run out of charge. Right when you start this game, running out of power is the biggest threat to your survival by far. So that's the first thing we want to do. So here's my solar power panel. It's not constructed yet, but the power output will lead straight into this APC. And this APC can act as a battery charger temporarily. Now to construct this solar power panel, we'll want to grab the battery and then head over to our construction supplies and grab glass. All it requires is for you to put... Oh, I guess we already put the glass down. So put the battery into the battery charger. We can flick it on and then grab our wrench if we really want to and point this solar power panel towards the sun so it absorbs more light. Not that big of a deal given that this battery is already full. Let's construct our, actually, while it is light out and we can see ores, let's go ahead and put our tool belt away and grab our mining belt and don the mining belt. And then additionally, I'm going to go and put some of my unnecessary things in my backpack away and definitely 100% grab the duct tape. The reason why you might need duct tape is if you have some sort of accident or collision, it's fatal unless you patch the holes in your suit. So I'm going to turn on my jetpack, and the first thing I want to do is to gather some gold, some iron, and some copper. We're going to want roughly a stack of gold, which means 50, and then maybe 3 stacks of copper and more than that of iron. If you can't immediately find gold or copper, which can be rarer than iron, just keep looking, but make sure that you don't get lost. Always keep your base as a point of reference, because if you wander away from your base, you will eventually run out of power and die. The initial barriers to long-term survival, in my opinion, are in order of power, because your suit will run out of power pretty quickly. Your suit uses power to keep your air filtered and your suit the proper temperature. The light on your suit, which can be controlled with L, doesn't actually use that much power, as you can imagine. It's mostly the atmospherics and filtration that are power hogs. And you will quickly run out of power. Now, if you're curious what your power levels are, all you got to do is hit 3. And right now, under life support, as you can see, the battery is on high charge. It goes from full to high to medium to low to very low to critical. And there will be some warnings for you. Once your battery hits low, you'll start to be warned of its low status. I do now have a stack of 50 gold, so what I want to do to make sure that I don't forget that there's gold here, I'll mine some of the terrain around the remaining gold so that I can very easily tell at a glance, traveling by, what's still here. I will be able to see, oh yes, gold. Now here's some iron. Up there is a resource that we're not going to need for a while, nickel. That is a resource that goes into higher tech stuff. But right now we are low tech. Now I would say initially 3 stacks of iron might be good. Iron is definitely the most bountiful. Initially you can build a lot of your structures with iron. Frames and sheets and stuff like that, but it's actually more economical and more structurally sound to build out of steel. Steel has a higher melting point, a higher pressure point. It's sturdier, basically, and it's also cheaper. Because of that it's stronger, you use less of it. So new bases will be heavily iron, but if you want to build a mega structure, you're definitely going to want to consider building it out of steel instead. Now, fortunately, the battery on your drill lasts a very, very long time, but if you're ever out of power and you have no capacity to recharge, you can always use your mining pick. It's much, much, much slower and much more inefficient, and I highly, highly advise against ever using your mining pick, because it's just so dreadfully inefficient. But if you're in a pinch, you're in a pinch. I get it. And that would be this tool here. As you can see, a whole lot slower. Okay, that's probably enough iron for now. I'm going to use my jetpack, which is J, and jetpack out of that hole, and now I'm going to be looking for copper, which is a greenish tinge. And also coal, but I just found coal. Coal comes a little bit later. I'm going to worry about copper first. So what I like to do is to travel in somewhat concentric circles around my base so that I don't get lost. Either always keeping it on your right or left. Also, try to avoid any high-speed collisions. Ooh, look at this cavern. This cavern that has nothing in it. Avoid some high-speed collisions because it doesn't take a lot of velocity in order to smash up your suit. And if that ever happens, switch quickly to the duct tape in your inventory and hold right-click and patch up your suit. So here's some copper, but I doubt it's a big node of it. Yeah, it was just a little singleton of copper. That does happen from time to time. More iron. Now sometimes if you travel too fast over the surface, you'll actually not see the materials that you're looking for. And also the faster you go, the more likely you are to have a sort of damaging collision. If you're ever wondering how fast you're going, up here is your meters per second. And you want to keep that not to an excess, I'll put it that way. So keeping my base as a point of reference, I am still on the hunt for significant copper. I keep finding teeny little nodes of it on the surface that lead nowhere. And this will happen, and this will likely happen to you with all sorts of materials. Sort of teased materials, as I like to call it. I mean, if you're really strapped for a certain element... Oh, here we go. This is at least some copper here. I see 3 on the surface, which means it leads to something. And we're going to want at least 50, but probably mine out this whole node. And of course, keep in mind where the base is in relation to you. Because it's very easy once you're deep into the crust of Mars to sort of forget what direction you're facing. There are items called trackers, which allow you to find your way back home. And if you're curious about them, you can always wiki the tracker. If you have a very bad sense of direction, they can be a godsend. Now keep in mind, you can store more ore than what will fit in your mining belt. Your mining belt does have capacity, storage capacity, as you can see, it's filling up on the bottom left. But if you exceed the capacity, ores can be put into your backpack or some other slot, whereas ices, like volatiles or ice or oxide, cannot. It will melt. Unless, of course, you're like in space. But I'm on Mars with an atmosphere, and I don't want my ices, when I mine them up, to melt. Oh, and it looks like I've hit some sort of underground pocket cavern. So I said initially the first barrier to long-term survival is power, and that's what we're working on now. We're getting all this iron, copper, and gold will allow us to automate our power grid so that we generate power far more efficiently. So now that my my mining belt is all full up, what I will do is mine out around this copper so I can find it in the future, turn off my drill, put the drill back, and return back home. And as you can see, because it's nighttime, it's definitely a little bit harder to see than if it was daytime. But if you skim the surface, you can kind of see structures Eventually, once you have a larger base, it'll be very, very obvious where you had built. And the reason why I stopped what I was doing in the middle of base construction to go mining is it's very, very easy to get lost. So as you can see here, if I go straight up into the high atmosphere, it will get a little bit lighter. But this won't necessarily help you spot your structures unless you have a keen eye. So as you can see, I did spot my home here, and I did a very, very, very quick low pass over it. And it's somewhere ahead of me here. I'm trying to minimize the collisions I have, and here we are, back home. Now, in the case that you get fully lost, highly suggest sort of making sure you know where you're going. So now, what I'm going to do is all of these ores that I have here, I will just sort of dump out. There's a nice little crevice here. If you don't have a crevice like this, you can mine one out to store your ores. And let's go ahead and switch belts. And the first thing I'm going to do is to construct this auto lathe. So that means I need iron sheets. And while I have the iron sheets in hand, I might as well construct my airlock. So I'm going to weld 2 sheets to the bottom and 1 sheet to all the sides. And I'll do 2 sheets to the bottom here and here. 2 sheets makes it airtight. 1 sheet allows you to place objects on it. And that part is done. Now the next step of the auto lathe is to add 4 cables. And then welding 2 plastic sheets to it. So let's switch to plastic. And then the last step is to use a screwdriver and just screw in the last parts. So now our beautiful auto lathe is complete. And I'm going to stop the auto lathe, the arc furnace rather, from smelting the remainder of the copper. Instead, grabbing whatever copper I've smelted and switching to iron. Iron smelts a little bit faster. And the reason I'm doing this is I really want a furnace. So the first thing I'm going to do is to find the furnace, which is right here, the furnace kit. And it will require 30 iron and 10 copper. I already have 34 copper. So 30 iron means that when this reads 20 left, that will be 30. 30 already smelted and 20 left to be smelted. And if I want to cut this job early, I can just hit the power button. As you can see, I've done 31, which will be plenty. 1 left over to make the furnace. Now with the auto lathe, what will happen is if I had enough resources to make 2 furnaces, let's say I had 60 iron and 20 copper, it would in fact make 2 furnaces. It only uses up the materials once it's fully constructed, so you can always either hit this button here or the power button to stop it. Now next up, I'm going to do gold. Gold is very, very inefficient to do on an arc furnace because it takes a very, very long time, as you can see. I powered through the iron pretty quick, but this gold takes a lot longer, which means it takes a lot more power to do. And while we wait for that, I will set up some of my airlock. So the first part of the airlock I'm going to put down is a console and an active vent, like that, facing that way. So the active vent's vent pipe faces this end of the base, and the power faces inwards, and then the power on this console faces down. All very, very important to denote. Next, we're going to grab a sensor and doors. If I could actually grab the doors, there we go. The sensor we can put up top, and make sure you use your mouse wheel to make sure it's a gas sensor. And then the doors, make sure it's a composite door, and have the power cables, I like to face them inwards like that. Now at this point we could go ahead and construct the doors. So that means welding sheets to it, and then grabbing glass and crowbarring glass into the doors, and then forcing the doors open with our crowbar. So now the doors are fully constructed. I can put the glass away. And here is my furnace. Beautiful. Now I'm going to stop smelting the gold because it just takes so darn long. And I'd like to store my ores in my, my airlock because there's a lip on the door that prevents them from rolling away. Although, in a pit like this works pretty well too. And I'm going to start smelting copper again. As you can see, the battery on this is depleting in power. Now the next object I want to queue up to make is an electronics printer. And I already have all the materials to do it. Perfect. And the electronics printer will allow me to construct the pretty much between the furnace and the electronics printer, I'll be able to make the beautiful power grid that I am wishing for. Now, if you really are strapped for power, you can always use the solid generator, which burns coal for power. I find it to be a fun personal challenge not to use the solid power generator. But it's a perfectly viable solution if you find yourself hurting. Now, at this point, my character's probably pretty hungry, so I'm going to go ahead and consume a cereal bar. As you can see, I've consumed all but 17% of it. Let's go ahead and put the data disk. We don't have to close that, but put the data disk into this console, which will help us program our airlock in the future. And then, additionally, let's go to our consumable goods box, which is somewhere this direction. I'm going to put these boxes upright. Here it is. And we're going to want to take the advanced airlock circuit board and the labeler. I guess I can leave that open. So let's put the advanced airlock in here. And then the labeler, we can hit O to turn on, and that allows us to label certain objects. So this is the exterior door. This is the interior door. This is the interior vent. And I do not yet have an exterior vent. And then once we're done with the labeler, we can put it into our backpack. Now that we have electronics printer, we can go ahead and construct it. What I'm going to do is turn off our APC to conserve power, though. And I will also put some of the things in my inventory away. Like my road flares. I have a huge stack of them. Here's the tracking beacon I was talking about. In case you feel like you need the tracking beacon. I, for one, don't feel like... I mean, I do get lost, but I usually can find my way home. Alright. Wunderbar. So the next thing we're going to want to do is to get some steel out of our furnace. So I'm going to lay out a place for the furnace with the iron frames here. And I'm going to lay out a place like this. And this is actually where our atmospherics will eventually be built, which involves the furnace. The furnace is a part of atmospherics, believe it or not. So we'll put 3 more frames down. And I just got a low power warning, which I can go and fix. So what I'm going to do is to make sure that this solar power panel is getting as much power as it can, filling up this battery here, and then we'll put that battery into our suit once that battery's full. That doesn't seem right. The eggs were sticking out of its carton. It's fine, I'm not all that worried. Now, if you really, really need power, you can also use the portable solar panel, but it's very inefficient. I would not advise using it. It's not terrible for filling up a small battery, but big batteries, that will take days and days and days, and you'll be dead way before you're able to fill up a large battery full of power. So I'm placing some sheets down so that we can walk on that newly constructed frame. Just to get rid of the warning, let's go and swap to the battery that was in the APC. And then we'll lay our furnace down. So I'm going to have the furnace face us. And for us to construct the furnace, we're going to need sheets. So first, we're going to have to wrench some sheets to the furnace, and then weld some sheets to the furnace. All set. Next up, we're going to grab pipes and valves. So with the pipes and valves, I'm going to have 2 straight pipes like this. And then using delete, I'm going to rotate my valves so that they face outwards. And then we can put the pipes away if we wish. Let's go ahead and angle this sort of neutrally towards noon. It won't be the max efficiency, but it will be somewhat efficient for the next 10 minutes or so. Because I want the batteries to charge up, but I also want to take the opportunity, because it's daytime, to mine up what I need to make a big batch of steel. So looking at what we have a half stack of iron and a stack of iron. So I'm going to want at least 2 more stacks of iron and a stack of coal. Also, I'm going to want some oxides and volatiles. So here's some iron, but it doesn't look like it's going to be a big node of it. Yep, it is not. Iron shouldn't be that hard to find. Here's some ice. I don't need ice, I need oxide, which is a deeper blue. And basically what oxide is more or less frozen oxygen, and here it is. And volatiles is frozen hydrogen, and that allows you to combust those 2 ices in a furnace in order to produce heat and pressure so that you can smelt things. Because otherwise your furnace would be full of whatever is in the atmosphere, and in this case it's 95% CO2. And I can show you in the future how to measure that kind of stuff with your portable tablet and the cartridge. But it's not all that important right now. Just know that you can't breathe the atmosphere on Mars, or really anywhere in this game, unless you manufacture an atmosphere yourself. So I'm looking to get 50 coal. It's, in my opinion, easiest to make a big batch of steel right up front. It will require a little bit more mining than if you made a smaller batch. You can make a batch of almost any size. You can make a batch as small as 4 steel at once. But the first object that I have in mind to manufacture requires 20 steel, so it requires at least a 20 batch of steel. And the way to make steel is to build a furnace and then put oxide and volatiles into the furnace for combustion, and put a 3-to-1 ratio of iron to charcoal, or coal rather. Any other amount won't yield anything. So if you have 50 coal and 150 iron, it will yield steel. But if you have any other number other than that, if you had 51, you would need 153 iron. It has to be in the right ratio, otherwise it won't work. It just won't work. So you've been warned. And then if you end up making some sort of reagent, if you end up screwing up the recipe, you'll have to put it into a special, well, ironically, the special tool to separate out elements requires steel to build. So screwing up your first batch of steel comes with a big old penalty of essentially having to mine and try a new batch from scratch. Unless you know how you screwed up. Because let's say I put 40 coal and 150 iron into my furnace to create some weird reagent. To fix that reagent, all I would need, if I knew how I screwed it up, all I would need is to put in 10 more coal, for instance. But if you don't know how you screwed up, which is generally the case, then you're back to sort of square one. Now, every single material in this game can be manufactured by the same, all but one, I should say, the same ratio of oxides and volatiles into your furnace, which is great. Very, very, very convenient. All right. I have enough iron already. I need to find some volatiles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to expose this iron so that I can find this later. And then look for some volatiles. Here's some additional coal. Don't need it. Volatiles are a reddish ice. Probably the most unique looking material in the game, so it's pretty easy to spot. But it also wouldn't hurt for me to get some more oxide. Oh, and here's a perfect example of me damaging my suit. So I'm going to turn off my drill and put it away, and quickly find my duct tape. Put it into my hands, and patch up my suit. I punched a hole in my helmet and my suit. Because I came down a little bit too hard and too fast when trying to pursue mining. And you have about 3 collisions before your suit's gone. And unless you're in unless you can very quickly get to a pressurized environment, or you have like some sort of backup suit, breaking your suit is generally fatal. And I'm gonna try to play Iron Man here, which means no mistakes, dead is dead. You should also be careful about how fast you're moving with your jetpack, because that is probably the easiest way to have a fatal collision. Alright. So this battery that I put into the APC here has filled up entirely, which is great. So what I'm going to do is to grab the metals and coal out of my backpack, but leave the ices inside the mining belt. They will melt if you take them out of the mining belt. And then before the sun goes fully down, what I want to do is to tilt the solar power panel to face the sun so I can get every last drop of solar power before the sun goes away. Because this will charge this battery up a little bit. Now, having to constantly manually charge your batteries kind of suck. So that's the first thing we're going to do, is to automate the charging so that you don't have to manually do it. So what I'm doing right now is just constructing my electronics printer. The same way we did the auto lathe. And that's about all the time I have for this series so far. So I'm going to go ahead and save. And let's call this Mars 1. And roll the credits. So if you have any questions for me, or feedback, or anything like that, please drop me a line. I know this game is very, very complicated, but I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might have about it. And I do hope that you tune in next time. I will be, next episode, doing the automation of solar power panels, which is very cool and very useful, especially in a long-term survival scenario. So thank you all very much for watching. I'll catch you all later. Adios.